Welcome to the Industrial Control Systems Information Sharing and Analysis Center's monthly member briefing. Can everyone hear me all right?
Yeah, you sound good, Deb.
Fantastic. We'll take another minute or two to give those who are still logging in a chance to complete the process. If you're calling in on the telephone, you will find a PIN number on the GoToWebinar application. Please enter this PIN into your phone and press pound. This will allow us to manage background noise. My name is Debbie Wendell, and I will be moderating today's session. I serve as Community Director for the Center and oversee the Center's human-to-human information dissemination mechanisms. We provide a wide array of products for collaboration, including our LinkedIn group, Twitter account, Facebook page, IdeaScale community discussion board, YouTube channel, blog posts, member briefings and chat sessions, white papers, and much more. Our goal is to get our members accurate, timely, and actionable information in a way that best suits their needs. So now, on with the briefing.
Oh, go ahead, Deb.
Welcome to the Industrial Control System Information Sharing and Analysis Center's monthly member briefing, Industrial Control System Security for Municipalities. Hosted by ICS-ISAC Chair Chris Blask, the presentation features Miki Calero, Chief Security Officer for the City of Columbus, Ohio, as this month's subject matter expert. We will start off today's call with Chris giving a center update before turning the presentation over to Miki. But first, some housekeeping guidelines and our first poll. Chris will take the first few minutes of the call to brief you on the latest developments from the center. Next, Miki will spend about 30 minutes for his presentation. And finally, there will be a time for questions and answers at the end of the presentation. So if everybody take a minute there and go ahead and fill that out. This is the first time we've done polls, so bear with us. Okay, people are still voting. Give you a few more seconds here. All right, and I'm going to close it out now. All right, thanks guys for your responses. And now some more housekeeping guidelines and your second poll. I'll be attempting to keep as many of you as possible off of mute so that you can speak your thoughts or raise questions as appropriate. But please mute your headset or phone if necessary to help reduce unwanted background noise. When speaking, if you'd please introduce yourself and indicate your industry affiliation. Additionally, if you'd like to ask a question, you may also use the hand raise feature in the GoToWebinar application. After the meeting, a recording of this session will be available on the Center's website. And the slides may be available upon request and at the presenter's discretion. Please contact an ICS-ISAC staff member for further information. All right. Now I'm going to go ahead and close the poll, guys. All right, thank you again for your responses on that. So now without any further delay, Chris, it's over to you for this month's center update.
Thanks, Debbie. And we're just about 4 minutes after. We tend to try to give about that much time. We seem to have a good portion of the attendees in, and everybody else will have to catch up as we go forward. So, as Dave said, my name is Chris Blask. I know a number of you on the phone, and a number of you I haven't met before, so pleased to meet you, and thanks for your time. I want to talk about the ICS-ISAC, what it is, where it came from, since this is new to a number of you. Give you some updates on where we are and where we're going with all this, and how it fits into everything else. Very interested and excited to have Miki here today. Columbus is the 15th largest municipality in the country, quite advanced, I think, as far as municipalities go in addressing this issue. Miki has a great background in power. Worked 7 years in American Electric Power and so forth. So I think his insights will be very very interesting. So as you see on the screen here, this center was originally conceived last spring, coming up on a year since the idea originated. We engaged a broader circle of people and decided to put it together. One of the things that kicked off the idea of it is this diagram you see here, where the information sharing and analysis centers had been defined generally in 1998 under a presidential directive, and then re-upped under a Homeland Security presidential directive in 2003 as mechanisms for public-private information sharing. And most of these centers had been built along vertical lines, addressing the financial sector, electric sector, real estate, research, education network, and so forth. And there were some horizontal structures, the National Council, the multi-state, bundling them together, so supply chain and IT as things that everybody uses. And there wasn't an ICS-ISAC. So we started talking about putting the center together with people like Gib Sorbo at SAIC, who had been involved in building these things before, notably Sean McGurk, who had built the ICS CERT, the NKIC, and the public sector sharing mechanisms. And having validated, at that level that something like this should exist, we spent the summer and the fall of last year establishing the center and getting it up and running. Since then, it's come quite a long way, and we've got a lot of functionality together and a lot of things building out that we're very interested in everybody's input on, and getting a broader community together. So as we look at why we would need something like this, why do we need an industrial control system focus for public and private knowledge sharing? Part of the reason is that it's all one big system. Everything's connected to everything else. This study from 2001 I found very interesting. It talks about the dependencies inside a facility, as you see here, how many things can go wrong, and what they are, the dependencies internally. As you look at how individual systems, how power and water and transportation and communications and everything makes one big infrastructure, you start to see the potential for cascading failures. And for those of you who focus on the electric sector, you're familiar with the spaghetti diagram in the NISTR. And between infrastructures, between sectors, we see the same sort of thing. So as a lot of us who are researchers or understand the research world, you start thinking like an attacker, and in most cases they don't really care what they take down. They want to cause havoc, they want to cause pain, depending on who they are. So as the community of expertise that is trying to foil the bad guys, as we go through looking at individual sectors, that's good work. However, what we're doing is pushing our adversaries into attacking the weak underbelly. And again, this is one of these issues where, as I've gone through this over the years, we drive down past the sectors, we get to municipalities. At the end of the day, this is not about keeping the lights on. It's about keeping the people of, for example, Columbus, Ohio, up and running. So while we have not seen to date cascading failures due to cyber attacks, we have seen cascading failures from one set of infrastructure to another. And for all of us who are old enough to remember the day the pagers died, I remember myself, I'd gotten off a plane, I was working at Cisco at the time, we lived on our pagers and so forth, it didn't work. That's because this quaint little satellite out in space, the Galaxy 4, had died. And while that brought down the telecoms, a significant part of the telecom sector, it impacted directly the financial sector. ATM stopped working, credit card transactions stopped. It's probably the first case, undocumented to my knowledge, but a good study project for if any of you know a PhD student is looking for something to do some research on. There is documentation that healthcare first responders were impacted as well. So it's probably the first case where we could nail down that there was human life lost because of cascading failures in infrastructure. A little bit later, we all remember when the California grid was a bit of a mess in 2001, rolling brownouts and so forth. There was a study done at that time showing a dramatic loss in statewide GDP, over $32 billion in today's dollars. Also cascaded into industrial, cascaded into manufacturing, loss of jobs, loss of household income, and cascading, the entire western grid was less reliable, and other energy sectors, oil and gas production, were brought down as well. And then we see the other types of events. This West Virginia pipeline rupture just happened to pop up before another one of our monthly briefings. And while again it's not a cyber event, we see transportation impacted because of failures in other infrastructure. So those are the sort of things we think about a lot in with the ICS-ISAC. So information sharing, this is both an elephant in the room sort of issue. Right now I'm in Doha, Qatar. I'm speaking at the QCERT conference tomorrow and giving a talk on building common defenses through knowledge sharing. And I chose that title for that talk because of this, what we see on the slide here. We all know that information sharing raises certain hackles, and we see legislative attempts to address this. We've got the executive order and the Presidential Policy Directive 21 out just in recent days as efforts to move down that road. And when you start breaking it down, you realize a couple of things. Number one, that we will get this done. There is no defense that we can put together. We can't remediate PLCs. We can't get vendors to make better products and solve this problem. Those are all important things. But we have to have at least knowledge flowing. So if we look at data as atomic information, it's a syslog message. It's an IDS alert. It's some very small piece of information. Information, then, you can say, is all of that put together. If I'm running a water utility, I'm running a power utility, a manufacturing plant, an oil refinery, it's all of the telemetry, all of the topology that tells me everything I have as a system. When we talk about information sharing, this is where a lot of the psychological, sociological, and legal pushback comes. When you say, for example, for all best intents, I'm from the government, I'm here to help, all I want is your information, door slam shut. But what we really need to focus on is knowledge sharing. We'll talk about how we look at that at the center and how we think that can go forward. And very specifically, that means that it's not so much that you as an electrical co-op, for example, need to share everything in your dirty laundry and your potential risk of compliance issues by saying, I'm co-op ABC and I had this problem because I had a misconfigured device and here's all of it. What the rest of us really need to know is that a facility like yours, perhaps in a certain part of the country, had a kind of event at a certain point in time. And we need to know that now. That's knowledge. It's actionable, shareable intelligence that addresses the needs of the parties involved. And it's quite clear that most people involved understand this now. So all of this comes together to an architecture that we refer to as the Global Knowledge Network. You can rotate this model and look at it from a state level, from a municipal level, from a national level, and international level. And it's predicated on certain basic things. That at facilities, they have an ability to have knowledge of what they have and what it's doing. There are technical components of this. You can look at it as network whitelisting, security information management, SIM, SIEM, whatever you want to call it. But it's the same sort of functionality that these systems are built to provide of the process itself. One of the advantages that ICS has over IT is that the culture and the systems themselves are situational awareness systems. That's what they're for. So that you know the voltage, you know the pressures, you know the temperatures, you know the position of a robotic arm in four-dimensional space all the time. So the ability to take the technologies and processes that we have in IT and in computer technology as a whole and give these facilities the ability to know what their cyber systems are doing and what they consist of is very high. And it's an ongoing topic of conversation, of course, but I think that we will see more and more of this. So as facilities have an ability to have knowledge, they can then share that. In many cases, they have in existing relationships with service providers, with integrators who built their systems, with large integrators who provide services, where they're already sharing data and information. Those service providers then act as an early nexus of organizations that can see not just that something happened to an individual facility, but perhaps see that that same thing happened to 3 different facilities about the same time, or over different times. So you get a broader awareness. And in early 2005, when myself and Fahad Iqbal, we started a little company called Lofty Birch to look at this stuff in late 2005, and we started putting these things together and built this stack and have been watching since over the last 8 years now, as 7 years, as this has evolved. And you could tell that in the future there would be public centers like the ICS-CERT. And that structure, again, we see replicating around the world in different countries. U.S. CERT and the CERT structure, the Q-CERT here in Qatar, for example. And private centers have already existed. By definition, a lot of the private knowledge centers are the vendors themselves, are big consultancies where there's pools of information, pools of knowledge that can be shared. And there are dedicated private centers popping up these days as well. Red Sky Alliance is one that I like to point to as a very, very good knowledge center for that purpose. And then the private public centers like the ISAC matrix in the U.S. Would arise. And we would figure out how knowledge flows around between these various entities. And through this, we'd get the visibility that we need at a state level, at a regional level, at a municipal level, at a national and international level. So these are all the things that we focus on all the time. And as Debbie has said, in setting up this center, we look to leverage the known structures of knowledge sharing that have developed over the years in similar centers. Most of these are human level, like this session, where we get people together, we speak to each other, we share information. They're the workforce development things. Glenn Merrill has recently come on board as the workforce development director, is on the call here as well. How do we do training? How do we get knowledge out to students so that they can rise up and fill the needs? How do we take knowledge and put it in the hands of existing people in the industry, whether they're industrial folks, so we can help them understand the cyber issues? If they're IT people, how we help them understand how they can take their skills and put them into work in industry. And along with that, one of our prime focuses as well is getting the machines talking to each other. We look at the speed of attacks. We all know that if it comes down to sending emails and writing up reports and so forth and having these sort of sessions we're having now, the attackers will still win. Fortunately, we've had this parallel evolution going on where the ability for individuals and individual organizations to set up automated systems to share knowledge has advanced quite a lot. And this, as I'm run through real quick in this little animation here, this is the kind of thing we're looking for. And we're in the process of exercising this, and I think this calendar year we'll see a huge evolutions both here in the center and in the industry as a whole, where some source of knowledge, whether it's a researcher who finds a vulnerability or an active attack, whether it's a vendor who wants to share something that's timely, whether it's a facility that's had a new experience, like they've just been attacked, and sharing this in real time is useful, that automated systems will be put in place where that can go into a center like the ICS-ISAC, from there be propagated to other centers, and from those centers be propagated down to facilities, where appropriate steps can be taken by those facilities, where at the very least, if you look at that electric utility in the lower left, they can, as of this moment, be aware that this is an attack, put a monitoring rule in place on their systems, so if they see that, they know it's a bad thing right away. Perhaps they put in active defenses, but that's down to the decision-making process for each individual facility. But what they can also do is, since they will have the ability to use this knowledge, then by definition they have ability to have knowledge and create knowledge, such as, now that I know this is an attack, let me look at my logs, let me look at my forensics, and find out if I've seen this before, and if, in fact, I have. And 6 months ago I saw this once, and 6 weeks ago I started to see it a lot, and the last 6 days it's trending upwards. Then there's knowledge that I can share. Perhaps not the data, perhaps not the information, but I'm an electric utility in the southeast U.S., and I've seen this pattern of attacks. And share that back up, through their MSSPs, through whoever they have the peer relationship with, into further nodes of the knowledge network, so that ramifies out to where this is needed. And where we can build the structure like this, we see the autoimmune systems that arise out of this, where as soon as an attacker has any success, then every other facility becomes immune to that, where we as a nation and where we as an international community have the ability to move as fast or faster than the attackers in having awareness of what's going on, putting mitigations in place, then we fundamentally change the situation that we're so familiar with now, that the bad guys have the upper hand, we're in a bad position. When we can put in systems like this, I think that we have the opportunity to turn the tables around completely. So in the last couple of weeks, we've gotten conversations going with a number of organizations. This is just a sketch of an architecture that we're looking to exercise in the first half of this year. But as you look around the screen there, you see there's organizations like Columbus. There's a municipality that has multiple different infrastructures, power, water, and so on and so forth. There's knowledge centers like EnergySec and the ICS-ISAC that have their functions to bring together this information, share it, analyze it, and so forth. In the public sector, federal space, the Department of Homeland Security, and everything that implies has relationships to share information. The multi-state ISAC, the Southern States Energy Board, is the SSEB is a group of 16 governors with diligence responsibilities to 16 states and 2 territories, and vendors and other sources. Palantir, talked about here on the screen, is involved in these conversations as well. They're an example of a technology company that has developed the analysis and sharing tools that exist today. So to the point of this is that the organizations exist as in very much the way they didn't exist 5 years and 7 years ago. The technology exists, the awareness and the understanding exists. So we have this opportunity in the medium term to exercise and demonstrate these sort of structures. I think this calendar year will really be a crux for all that, and over the short term, build out systems that address the fundamental needs that we're all after. So before I pass off to Miki to do his section of this, quick update of where we are as a center. So it was April of last year when we had the first initial idea of building the center came together. In June, the organization was incorporated as an entity. Through the summer and August, got a website up, started gathering open source information, sharing that. In October, did a sketch demo of some real-time knowledge sharing technology we put together at the ICS-ISAC. Started these calls in December. In January, got involved. Debbie and Glenn got involved at something more than just volunteer, and started the conversation, the real-time sharing pilot, started looking at internships and workforce development. And with this, in this month, quite a lot is going on. We're looking at adding additional monthly sessions, or first Wednesdays and second Wednesdays. We can talk about that a little bit later on. And sending out email updates to our membership on a monthly basis, as well as when individual things happen, like the executive order and PPD 21. So for the members on the call, you should have all received a poll gathering information. We've gotten some input from some of our membership on the executive order and on PPD 21. We're interested in gathering that, gathering as much thought as we can get on that, so we can perform our role as a concentration point for private sector opinions. And of course, we thank everybody who's a member already. It's through the support of members that we're able to do these sort of things. And for all the folks who aren't members on the call now or listen to this recording later on, there's a number of reasons to be part of this. We've had potential members go through the process of building the justification of doing this, and they come up with some of these points on the screen. Being part of this conversation, a lot of us as individuals, we're the 300. We need to make ourselves the 3,000, the 30,000. We need to not just be going to conferences, but be actively involved in this conversation. And the value to all of us to hear what you have to say. And there are pools of expertise inside each of the individual organizations represented on this call that everybody else will benefit from hearing. And the real-time knowledge sharing is I think, an important exercise for us each individually. I also think it's the #1 answer to all our problems. And when we sit here with the executive order with PPD 21 and everything else going on, I think more than ever the importance of having the private sector stand up and with as much as possible a consistent voice, determine, help the public sector determine what steps are necessary. Do we, we can, if there's time at the end here, talk more about EO and PPD. There's some excitement, there's some angst, but we know that the public sector will have to take whatever steps necessary in as much as the private sector doesn't. So where we can come together and build things like the knowledge sharing pilot, come to some consensus on what can be reasonably done as vendors and integrators. We protect our own interests, we protect the infrastructures we all care about, and we allow the public sector to do things that work in our context and all the others. The center specifically benefits from membership in 4 major ways. The strength in numbers. The more of us there are in this conversation, the more knowledge comes in, the more analysis can happen, the more reach goes back out. We are private sector funded, so while we'll work with entities, we've got a membership dues structure based on the size of organizations. Where this is difficult to get done at any one time, if a member is valuable enough, perhaps we can waive that, perhaps we can knock that down. It's not arbitrary, but of course, we do have to have people working and so forth, so funding is a great and wonderful thing. Knowledge that comes into the center can be shared outbound, and it multiplies. It's worth more than 1-to-1. The more knowledge comes in, the more exponential knowledge can be shared out. And outbound knowledge, where we as a center can share knowledge with an individual organization, and they can in turn share it with 10 or 100 or 1,000 others, then that meets the mandate of the center. So where any organization can meet 2 or 3 of these issues, it's very, very valuable. We understand that in some cases there's no ability to put funding in. That can be fine. We understand in some cases there's no ability to share information, and that may be okay too. And in most cases, at the very least, everybody will be able to take the information and the knowledge that the center produces and share it with others. So if you're not a member now, you can click the registration button on the site, fill in your form. There's even a PayPal link if you like to do those sort of things. You can contact anybody here and talk through it. But we exist to serve our community. The membership has grown quite a lot in these early stages, particularly this last month or two. It's a lot of people getting involved. I have to say, significant thanks to all of them. This is a relatively full set. There are others, some organizations, to the point of the last slide, don't want to be seen, so their logos aren't up here. But we've gotten a good cross section of different organizations, from the facilities themselves, from the vendors, from the integrators, from the security community, and others. And some of these folks are on the phone, and I know you're out there, so thank you very much. So with all of that, I am going to throw to Miki. So Debbie, if you want to take the reins back and give Miki the intro, and Miki, if you just say when you want slides to change, and they will change automatically.
Fantastic. Thanks, Chris, for that update. And now for this month's featured speaker, Miki Calero, Chief Security Officer for the City of Columbus, Ohio, established the city's Enterprise Security Risk Management Program that protects the 15th largest metropolitan cyber and communications infrastructure in the United States. The city is responsible for providing water, electric distribution, emergency building, and traffic management, as well as other infrastructure services to a population of approximately 800,000 residents. Now I'm going to launch our next poll, so bear with me here. All right, I'll give you time to go ahead and fill that out, and I will make sure to show the survey results when we're done. I'll do a little reading too while you guys are filling that out. With his 23 years of leadership experience across the public and private sectors, Mr. Calero's responsibilities have included protection of information systems, physical assets, and critical infrastructure in strategic, tactical, and operational capacities. His extensive experience, coupled with his dedication to cybersecurity issues, has earned him several awards and much recognition. Under his outstanding program leadership, the City of Columbus is being acknowledged by CSO Magazine with its CSO 40 Award in recognition as a security project and initiative that demonstrates exceptional business value and thought leadership. In addition, in 2012, Mr. Calero was named the most influential people in security by Security Magazine for his vision of the convergence of the physical and cybersecurity domains. He relentlessly promotes this holistic approach to security as the frequent speaker at national events and as a writer for security publications. All right. So we've gone ahead and closed that poll. Thank you. All right. Thanks again for your poll responses, guys. Now, Miki, the floor is yours. So let's go ahead and go on with your presentation.
Sure, Debbie. Thanks again for the introduction. And it was very helpful to see the results of the poll, just to get an idea of who you are, who's represented here, and just kind of in the back of my head understand some of the problems that you would be dealing with and why the ICS-ISAC would help you in that regard. To add a couple of details to my background, most recently and before the city, was part of AEP, American Electric Power, where the time was, it was around the blackout occurred. I'm sure everybody recalls that. Chris didn't mention it, but that was one of those cascading effect events that will go down in history. AEP also, I was part of the that organization when what was called at the time Urgent Action 1200 from NERC evolved into the Critical Infrastructure Protection, and today the standards for reliability. Debbie brought up a slide that I think brings it all together. I think out of all those people and out of all the attendees, a lot of them, a lot of us are going to be in that position. We will be living in cities. And those cities, next slide, those cities will have unique challenges in terms of how to ensure security, sustainability, and Debbie, can you switch slides?
Which one do you need?
Yeah, the next one.
That one? Okay.
Yeah, and we have challenges in terms of maintaining the ability of supporting the population. Smart, sustainable, secure really is where we want to go in terms of security, to make sure that that big population component is able to benefit both from the sustainability and the security of power, traffic control management, as well as water. One of the things, again, that I would like to highlight is, as a municipality, we own, operate, and are partners or stakeholders in a number of areas. And those areas do cut across and make us in a unique position where do we focus on the energy ISAC? Do we focus on the water ISAC? Who do we rely on to give us the information that we need, to share information with, and to generally make sure that that information is shared for the benefit of all? To paraphrase something that Chris said, he mentioned us, everybody being connected, which drives the point of information sharing. The way I like to put it is that your next bot army is my next denial of service. So that could be against my ICS SCADA systems, and that could be against my information systems. To the point of what the assets we operate our own, traffic control, water, water treatment, power distribution, generation, and smart grid. Now, smart grid is one of the newer things. We're slowly developing awareness in how to leverage the existing smart grid infrastructure that other providers of utilities have in place. So now that's going to even raise the bar further. If we're working with the American Electric Power, ask the city, can we leverage their smart grid infrastructure to the advantage and the benefit of our water systems? Likewise, the gas providers may want to leverage that as well. It's an infrastructure that is in place. It can be shared, but how is information about it? How is protection of it going to occur? Who is going to enable that? And I see the ICS-ISAC in one regard as an enabler of that information sharing.
Hey, Miki, I've got a couple quick polls to pop in here for you to get you some additional feedback. Kind of goes along with a couple things that you've had on this slide and the last.
Thank
you.
Go
ahead and launch that one. Your company's primary function. So you can kind of get a feel of who all we've got out there. Okay, people, are you guys done voting? We've still got a couple people logging in there. I'm going to close it, and this time I'm going to remember to share it. So there, that gives you an idea of who all we've got on the call. Fantastic.
Okay. Yeah. That information is rather helpful because, again, what I read from those slides and from those survey results is who is going to be a contributor, who can share information, and who can benefit from information shared. I just kind of came up with smart, sustainable, and secure for some of the articles that I had been writing, and really it encompasses in very general terms how we have approached and how we are pursuing security from a number of perspectives and across all those assets that I mentioned, both water, traffic control, and so on that you saw in the previous slide. Now, how to approach security in a smart way. I strongly believe that having the vision of bringing it all together is essential. That leads then to planning that is focused, and that leads to a strategy to make it happen. Now, sustainable really focus on the ability of the city to provide those services, to provide the protection to those assets in order to support the population in those centers. They cut across power, water, transportation, and ultimately sustainable public safety is going to be essential because we do not want situations where the absence of these services as provided by a city will lead to what I would call public unrest, public safety issues. And how to do this is how to secure is, and what to secure focuses on, in my perspective, across all assets, physical, information systems, ICS, and critical infrastructure. And that is today and into the future. Now that pretty much goes in line with what Debbie made reference to, and that is the convergence approach to cybersecurity and physical security. Can you go to the next slide, Debbie? Next slide, Debbie.
Yeah, there's a bit of a lag, but it should show up in a second.
Sure, no problem. Thank you. Okay. One of the things that we started when I first got here is, what do we have? And we found out that we have critical infrastructure, facilities, obviously, information systems, network, cyber security systems, physical security systems, and so on. And the reason I cut across all those was because in terms of gaining a situational awareness that would ensure the protection across the board of all those systems entailed identifying them as well as their capabilities. For one thing, the City of Columbus is rich in fiber. Hundreds of miles of fiber. What I just identified in this slide as network has really been a catalyst in making a lot of this happen, and making that connectivity for the purposes of convergence make it possible. We have deployed surveillance cameras. We have information systems. We're considering implementing a physical security information management, PSIM, as it's known, facilities, BACnet, and LEED certification, and so on, I think fall in line and are within the scope of what we should be looking at in terms of security. The last one I want to highlight, and I just listed it as data, is what is more commonly being referred to as big data. You'll hear that as the new buzzword, in my opinion, but it really has a basis. And the basis is, if you have the ability to go through all the data that all these systems are generating, whether it's a security information event management system, the SIAM, which is focused on information system security, and a PSIM, as well as metadata, potentially of surveillance footage, and so on, and really it's a long so on, then you are able to identify, and again, keywords, achieve situational awareness that will enable the protection of all those assets. Next slide, please. All right. One of the things also that we did as part of that, how do we get started, where do we go, is identifying, once we knew what those assets were, extending the reach of those assets, what we consider assets that would be within scope, was to assess, find out what the risk level of those assets would be. Obviously, one of the benefits and the purposes of that is to prioritize the resource allocation, or where we're going to focus our budget expenditure. Do we need to implement a security project, security capital project to fund the implementation of an enterprise security risk management program, as we did, or do we need to rely on other existing projects that are taking place? And projects are taking place across the board. We have capital projects for facilities improvement, for new construction, and they are occurring across all the agencies within the city. Utilities, having a different way of recovering costs, are somewhat in the periphery, so it is very important to generate that engagement with them to see if they're deploying surveillance assets, whether those assets are going to be connected using the existing network and sending that surveillance footage to the Security Operations Center to achieve that situational awareness that will protect all of the assets across the city. We, utilities in this case, engaged at different points in time a professional services organization that came in and did a comprehensive risk assessment in light of or in support of what they should do to protect their systems as they related to EPA and as they related to HSPDs. Now, when I say light, I think there's a growing structure, ability, organizations that can provide very focused, very targeted, very quick, and results-driven assessment that will get you started. ICS Security is one of them. We've been working with them, and I think the result of what they provided in terms of delivery would benefit an organization such as the City of Columbus. If there was nothing in place, within the span of a day, you would have a baseline that would enable future decisions. Again, out of all that, we can prioritize, allocate, and recover cost. We can also, from that priority perspective, think of, do we have a risk assessment that we update, or do we have to start from scratch? By the way, the slide and the image is fuzzy intentionally, so it's not an eye test, and it's not by an error. Just one of the many schemes in which to assess risk, and since it's open source and probably attributable, just wanted to make it a little bit non-specific. Next slide, Debbie, please. Ultimately, or the next step really is going to be in terms of identifying a framework that works for you. I'm big on frameworks. I'm very opposed to reinventing the wheel. And if there is something in place that you have to follow from the perspective of compliance or based on your risk assessments or the asset mix that you have in place, then you should pursue it and adopt it. Reason being, and in our case, we identified risk, we identified 800-53. I won't go into the acronym of what NIST or SB stands for. If you do want, just go ahead and ask the question toward the end. NERC reliability standard, that would be if you have a mix of assets that is more in lines with generation, transmission, distribution, and so on. If your basis is more HSPD or EPA, then obviously your framework may include components of those individual sections of the framework to pursue. 800-53 worked well for us. It cuts across, in general terms, anything that you have listed in the slide to a certain degree. Now, it's not 100% everything, although 800-53 up to its latest version had an appendix, a supplement, and also 800-53 series of, the SP 800 series of publications. There is one specific to the protection of industrial control systems. Interpolating, extracting, taking bits and pieces, you will come up with a framework that will likely achieve 85 to 100% of your requirements across the board. Next slide, please. What I refer to organization really is having a CSO or a high-level individual that can bring it all together. The strategy, the vision, the reporting, establishing a governance framework, and just basically making the rounds. There are different levels of maturity. One of them, and I refer to them as formal and informal, really a CSO can be organizationally over both physical security or facility security and SCADA controls, ICS security, and a number of other areas. As a matter of fact, the CSO could be also the Chief Risk Officer, or that would be a potential reporting structure.
Hey, Mickey. I've got another poll. I've got another poll for you here that's to measure the folks' primary job function that's out there now to kind of see how they might fit into this sort of chart. So let's go ahead and do another quick poll here. Give everybody a couple more seconds to chime in. All right. And I'm closing it now. And that's what we've got on the call.
A pretty broad other not listed component, but that's okay. I guess my position is really driving the point across the board, whether we have decision makers, supervisors, technical operators, or executives. Now, hopefully the expectation is not for me to go into air gaps or something as detailed as that. So it appears that at the level that I'm keeping it so far, it's just about right. Can you go back to the slides? Okay. So I mentioned reporting structures as being formal and having all these security functions under one, I would not call it a vertical, but under one of these slightly blurred structural drop-downs, and in our case, informal. Now, there could be what is referred to levels of maturity. I saw it in terms of this is beyond levels of maturity. The intent is to implement security, have a security risk management program for the protection of ICS, for the protection of physical and all the assets that you have in place. Traffic control management, and you saw them listed in another, in one of the previous slides. If it is informal, the challenges obviously are different than formal. The way that we approach it here, because that's the way that we were structured, is to, from day one, collaborate and cooperate. And when I mean from day one, I mean from day one, hour one, when a resource, a manager that I consider an invaluable partner in this endeavor, a facility security manager, we engage in a discussion about how we could have a single user database to be able to control physical access across all facilities that the city had that system deployed. Now, I cannot thank him enough. I cannot be more grateful for his ability and desire to be there, to be along for the ride. Cooperation, it's slowly built over the years, but I think one of the success criteria, one of the enablers of achieving that success criteria was to have a CSO position. At an executive level, it is more feasible to engage agencies as well as stakeholders, initiate discussion with external partners or across other agencies in the public sector. It is easier to do so than to have that type of discussion and intent at a more technical or supervisory level. Again, catalysts. This was another one. Added to the ability of the fiber, the ability to connect all those systems, and it really paved the way for some of the things that we, A, have accomplished, and B, are on our way to accomplish. As a public entity, the cycle, the implementation cycle is fairly long, but as Debbie made reference to when she introduced me, those successes, that perspective, that approach has been recognized, and I think people are paying attention because it makes sense. And if you keep it as simple as we have, and if you approach it in this manner, you will achieve results. You will achieve results. Partnerships, public-private, one of the ones that I consider is the ICS-ISAC. Earlier on, I made reference to, do we do the water ISAC? Do we do the energy ISAC, or do we do the ICS-ISAC? Well, one of the ISACs that I had the opportunity to join was yet another ISAC, the MS-ISAC, Multi-State Information Sharing and Analysis Center. And the reason being their focus is state, local, tribal, and territorial organizations. Even within that organization, even within that ISAC, there is recognition that ICS are an important component in an area that requires renewed attention. Attention that, as you know, with recent and over the last couple of years, we know that there is a threat to our ICS infrastructure. Therefore, we need to do something about it. So the MS-ISAC worked and created a ICS working group, of which I'm a member of. Again, you heard me say about my perspective, which is converging all these activities, converging security from physical and cyber security perspectives. And really my goal is to support any type of information sharing, any type of organization I can partner with to enable just that, the security, the protection of all the assets, not just mine, but yours. To provide vendors the feedback, some kind of input that helps them understand what the needs are in order to accomplish that, that goal. And drawing down to one of the last slides, I think, Debbie, can you flip to the next one? Before we open it for discussion, I want to highlight what I consider a case study. It's fairly recent, and by case study I mean, okay, this didn't happen here, but the moment I mention it to you, you'll know what I'm talking about. Okay, granted, the city of Columbus has had its natural disasters. We've had threats of flood, actual flood from one of our rivers. And at the time I was at AEP, for example, and we made preparations and we actually took action to be ready for that. I'm referring to Sandy. And if you don't remember Sandy, I'm not quite sure where you may have been. The case study, again, is Sandy. I think it was pretty telling that Sandy and New York City were combined for posterity, because some of the actions and some of the decisions were sound, were squarely in line with the goal of ICS security, the goal of having a reliable and resilient infrastructure, and systems, both information security, physical security, facilities, protected to the extent possible. Obviously, we have to all agree that this was unprecedented. So preparing for an incident, an event of this magnitude presented its challenges. I do extrapolate a couple of what I consider key events during that natural disaster. And here are a couple for your consideration as we end up speaking a little further and we open up for discussion. Okay, so before Sandy made landfall, Governor Cuomo activated a hurricane plan for the MTA. Now, the assumption is that part of that plan would be how to protect the ICS. That enabled the transportation system to resume as quickly as possible. Later on, as we found out, it took a little longer. Governor Cuomo went ahead and, Mayor Bloomberg made an executive order that facilitated the transportation system until the MTA and other more established transportation means got restored. And that was the one about sharing taxi rides and so on. Transportation, a critical infrastructure. Transportation and the ICS that manages it, that makes it possible. Here's another key event. I think I heard it a number of times, and hopefully you did as well. Restoring power was Mayor Bloomberg's second stated challenge. Okay, requiring Con Edison, which is the regional provider of power, to follow their prioritized disaster recovery procedures and make sure that the ICS that they had in place and operational was returned to service to the extent that it required to be. Again, unprecedented event, natural disaster presented its challenges as well, but those decisions and the ability to execute were in place and were followed. Further on, neighboring New Jersey, now we start talking about SCADA and ICS decisions as they relate to water. There was decisions about testing the backup generators to operate the ICS with the goal of uninterrupted service of water provision and so on. Making decisions about opening dams statewide, making decisions about what to do, following plans in place, made the impact of this natural disaster much less than it could have been. And then finally, a couple of things. New Jersey's transit system, or what is called the central nervous system, was also engulfed in water, which probably led to decisions about how to make it redundant and how to have power backup to it, given the importance of transportation. And finally, in the case of Sandy, nobody really made reference to the fact that there was a nuclear power plant nearby, which really raises the bar and the attention that ICS should be given. Fortunately, nothing happened. There were some plans and some activity that if you go into the NRC's website, you can see there are lessons learned from Fukushima Daiichi and what happened there a couple of years back, and those were published and likely served as templates for how to prepare for Sandy. I pretty much have covered ground with, at a very high level, trying to give you an overview of some of the things that we have applied, what I consider catalysts. Hopefully you will find some of those things that apply to your organization or make you think about others that I would have not known because we do not have them in place. Your lessons learned will be my lessons learned. So I look forward to hearing through the ICS-ISAC or whatever information sharing mechanism is in place of those catalysts that you had, and make me reshape what I consider a successful approach to ICS security as well as security overall. The slide says it all, open discussion and wrap up, so I look forward to answering any questions you may have.
Fantastic. Thanks, Miki, so much. That briefing was awesome. Lots and lots of good points brought up to feed our upcoming discussion. I'm going to throw up a quick poll here, really quick, just to kind of test the temperature again of the audience and see which way you guys lean. Do you lean more towards policy-type solutions, or do you lean more towards tech-type solutions? So we'll leave that up here in for just a second before we close that out. And then we'll open it up for your questions. Again, if you haven't had the opportunity or spoken up already, please introduce yourself and indicate your industry affiliation so we know who you are and where you're from. You can enter your questions through the GoToWebinar application, or you can also use the little hand raise feature there, and we'll unmute you so you can ask your question.
By the way, Debbie, I'd like to point out that a couple of questions have come up from the audience, and I'm just taking a look at them now.
Okay.
So they might be for Chris or myself, so I'll take the time that people are using to go through this survey to see if any I can contribute to.
All right. I'm going to go ahead and close the poll so we can see what we've got here and share that rascal. Okay. Very good. So we've got, we're leaning towards the tech solutions, but got some policy people there too. Very good. So I'll give you an idea where folks are coming from direction-wise there. So.
Yeah, it's an interesting mix, given the focus on policy with the executive order and PPDs and everything else going on. I think we all know that it's really both, and I got to say, as Debbie said, Miki, fantastic. That was great. And it's precisely those sort of perspectives that you developed, with your background pre the city, and then I don't know if it got mentioned, but I think it's 5 or going on 6 years now that you've been working with the city, and in conversations we had initially, it takes this time, and there's a lot of structure in place. There's a lot of policy structure in place. Yeah, and I think one of the challenges we have is that I think the vast majority of people who are directly in this community are technology people, and we search for the technical solutions, and they're critical. I mean, you've got to technically fix certain things. However, if we don't involve the organizational issues you touched on, you have the right people in place, have the right motivations in place. If we don't engage with the different structures, human structures, that you and I have talked about in the past. How do you identify all the organizations involved? How do you find out what motivates them? How do they work? How do you align those? Then all the technical structures in the world aren't going to help.
I'm going to add to that, Chris, and give you the opportunity to take a look at the questions, which I think may be more geared to you, but to focus on the poll, and based on the poll, here's what I would say. Chances are there's a great likelihood that technology solutions are in place more than policy solutions. Okay, we have to recognize that fact. I think the likelihood is quite high that is the case. That's why I mentioned doing an inventory of assets that you have, and at least start at the technical level, at the pragmatic implementer, and what you have in terms of tools, and how you can start unifying them or sharing information internally before more than likely focusing on the policy that will say you shall do this. Okay? In terms of maturity, your focus is more than likely on achieving compliance before you start focusing on having the policy that the compliance requires, as well as having the solutions, technical and otherwise, that will ensure compliance and, more importantly, security of those assets. So again, at what point do you find yourself in the maturity level? Chances are, again, that not many organizations represented here or in general have ACSO. But looking at what the technology solutions are, I think it's it is activity that can be performed at any level. It can be in any setting. I found out that many times that happens to be in hallway discussions. You'll find out that an agency has this system or is considering pursuing this system, and the light bulb goes on, and you say, hey, you know, maybe we should talk about this. There's no reason for you to implement a physical access control system in a separate database and you pursuing that, an enterprise level solution, when in fact not only is it going to be more cost effective to build on the one we have, but it's also going to improve security. You inactivate an account, an access control card in one database, and you pretty much inactivate access to all facilities versus having to do it independently. So that's just one example of many that I can think of.
Yes, I think the examples of Hurricane Sandy is important as well. You know, this has come up, you know, in San Bruno and other instances we've seen where, you know, when we talk about security, we don't always mean hackers, and there's as lots of people in the various sectors point out, they deal with storms and trees already, and it's at the end of the day, as your primary point, it's about keeping services up to people. When you look at the attacker perspective, though, what better time, to attack something than when you already have problems. So during a Katrina event, during a Sandy event, during the cascading, you're right, the Northeast power blackout, as an adversary, that's a lovely time to throw a virtual hand grenade into the mess. So it's that combined perspective, in a couple of points you touched on, the nerve center and the transportation nerve center in New Jersey, for example. This comes up iteratively in these conversations where it's, in the act of keeping a municipality up and running, for example, and you have a weather event going on, and you can tell through various means, not just IT or ICS electronic means, but that water is rising and you're about to lose a vault, that has equipment in it. What can you do from an emergency management standpoint, knowing that you've probably got 15 minutes or half an hour or an hour or two until you start losing assets? These are the combination, the sort of combination scenarios that we're all trying to build towards. There was a
great question.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Chris.
I was just going to...
I see a great... Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I saw one question about telecommunications, and where's telecom in all this? Intrinsic. As you said, Miki, it's a lot of the fiber you have that allows you to do this. In the ISAC structure, the NCC, the telecom ISAC, is one of the mainstays of all this.
Well, I'll defer maybe comment or response to that one that came via chat, but I'll focus on this one that came actually from Columbus, Ohio. Where do you see third-party vendors playing their role as funded R&D SMEs? Research and development, subject matter expertise, maybe I cannot speak to as directly as I can at a level that I have experienced. And I mentioned third parties and external providers, as well as partnerships, public and private. What I have experienced is that through engagement and long-term discussions and commitments and willingness and so on, these parties have seen and support the vision and the effort that you are undertaking, and if they align with it, they will support it in ways that you could not be able to influence directly. So in my particular case, there are a couple of professional service organizations that have been providing service across the city. Over the couple of years, we were able to make sure that they were in line and they advocated for physical access systems that communicated. They were able to, on their own and based on those discussions and commitments, persuade those agencies to engage in the collaboration and communication. On another front, exploring now more of the potential structures that exist for, sorry, I'm reaching out here to a document that I recently came across, pursuing the different types of partnerships, and believe me, there are many, and I'll be glad to provide you the link to this gem that I found. Basically, it's operations and maintenance type of partnerships, design, build, maintain, design, build, operate, and each of those has a definition. The one that I'm referring to is one of our vendors, and having that discussion where they would benefit from something as simple as being able to make reference to us as the model for their implementation of their solutions, committing to a multi-year support and agreement in terms of something as simple as what I said, and in return, reduce costs and provide us staff above and beyond what we had at no cost to the city, as long as some kind of agreement, non-financial, was in place. That's exciting, and I'm in the middle of pursuing that. So, again, I didn't answer the specific question about R&D SMEs, but hopefully it gives an idea of what the range of possibilities are in terms of P3s, public-private partnerships.
Yeah. And Bernadette, you had a question as well. We've taken you off mute. If you get your hand up, if you want to speak away, the floor is yours. So, Bernadette, we can hear you now. So if you want to, I see. Oh, okay. Sorry, can't get it to work. All right. So we'll put you back on mute then. Yeah, there we go.
Maybe if Bernadette can type in her question, we can get it answered that way.
And Miki, to your point, I know the person asked in Columbus asking that question. I'd be happy to introduce you to. That's
okay, great.
Very good resource there.
Mm-hmm.
So we're approaching the end of our time. We officially have 90 minutes for this, so we want to keep it in there and respect people's time. So anybody that wants to join in the conversation this last little bit, feel free to raise hands, ask questions, and we'll deal with all of those. We didn't get to talk much about the EO and PPD, so Miki, you and I haven't had a chance to talk about this. I've got my own thoughts on it, but do you have any top of mind, reactions about the executive order, and do you see it from a municipality's perspective, a good or bad thing, or wait to see?
I think at this point in the webinar, I would reserve that for a more extensive discussion, and I'd like to make it a much more informed response rather than off the cuff.
Sure, I know what you mean.
In this specific case, right. I think the implications and the potential is significant. I'd like to, dissect it a little more. But as the minutes dwindle down and as we attempt to get that other question asked, I think I see a comment in the chat about, let's see, without communications, IT sector is pretty useless. Can't share info or make decisions. I wish I could answer that or contribute, but it is telling. It is telling if I understand what that person is trying to convey.
You know, there's a couple points there. There's the communications sector. I sort of touched on that earlier in the ISAC context. And then there's communications at all. There's another question came up on what's the ICS-ISAC doing as in regards to classified information. So we're late in the process now, finalizing an agreement with Department of Homeland Security to have access to that information. So by the time we do these monthly briefings, we should have our formal structure in place. So we've been having discussions about how that exactly works. And I think this is a big issue for the federal public sector in trying to determine how they use the knowledge they have with all the complex needs they have with national security and so forth. And I think, some of the things I think that are worth sharing is that, I see very positive evolutions from the public sector and the federal public sector in their understanding that both they need to share the knowledge they have as much as they can. I like the evolution of that conversation. Also that they're very specific on what they don't want to know. Everybody involved here, we're all smart folks. Everybody's been around the block. And, the ICS-ISAC is very specifically for its membership. And, we will defend the knowledge that is shared with us, in the interest of our members. Our federal public sector partners understand this as well. And, they very specifically don't want to, be in the position of having information, having knowledge they shouldn't. So I think it's a very mature conversation between all parties, not just the ICS-ISAC and DHS, for example, but to my earlier point about how we've evolved over time, I think that everybody engaged understands the major risks, that we have to work through this so that we can have the shared visibility and the shared knowledge, and that we need to both do this in certain ways and not do this in certain ways. So with all of that, we're 23 minutes after the hour. We've gone a little longer than we tend to on these things, but it's been a very useful session. While we've got a few minutes officially left, if anybody else wants to throw some commentary in, we're happy to do that. On an ongoing basis, on the ISAC website, ICS-ISAC.org, you'll find an events tab that lists out these monthly sessions. Next month, the third Wednesday, the speaker is Ray Potter, the CEO of SafeLogic, that does very interesting work in cryptography. Going to have a session talking about the application and the challenges and opportunities with cryptography in the industrial control system space. For members, there's an open session call every Thursday at 2 p.m. So for those of you who are members, we encourage you to show up at that. If you're registering and becoming a member, you'll find that information on the inside, on the community section of the website when you log in. And if you're not members already, of course, we encourage you to become them and become part of the solution. The Publicly Accessible Control Systems Working Group is something else worth noting. This is a very long-term effort we've engaged with EnergySec to help move forward. There was a meeting last month of stakeholders on this issue as well. It's not looking to be a spam list or a endless chat session, but it addresses the kind of issues we're talking about. Most folks are probably familiar with Project Shine, which enumerated 500,000 or more exposed industrial control systems. So these are the types of issues, as a center we look to engage in. How do we get information sharing flowing? How do we get knowledge moving from point A to point B? How do we add to that, and extrapolate the values so that we can have a commonly shared and redundant infrastructure? The kind of activities that I'm out here in Qatar doing, talking with international partners, helping them move forward so that they're in the position to have useful knowledge that benefits all the rest of us, and recognizing that we live in a connected world that goes beyond our state, regional, municipal, national boundaries. It's a lot of the organizations involved in all of this are multinational organizations. All of us, no matter how local we end up, our perspective is rely on systems that go beyond borders of any definition. So I want to thank everybody for their time today. And Debbie, I think, has a little wrap-up at the end of here. But this has been a great session. Miki, you're awesome. You bring a great perspective to all this, and I look forward to your involvement going forward. Debbie, the floor is yours.
On behalf of all of us at the ICS-ISAC, we appreciate your joining us today. We hope that you found the information of value and something that you can take and implement to further secure your industrial control systems. As a reminder, a recording of today's webinar will be available on the Center's website. And again, as Chris pointed out, our next member briefing will be held Wednesday, March 20th, again at 1 o'clock Eastern Time, and features Ray Potter, CEO of SafeLogic, presenting Cryptography for Industrial Control Systems. You can register for this and other great ICS-ISAC events on our website. Thank you again for your participation, and have an awesome rest of your day.